Hey everybody, how you doing? My name is Rio Youers. I am the author of the new novel, The Bang Bang Sisters, and I am so pleased to be hanging out with my good buddy, David Temple, here on the Thriller Zone.
Hello and welcome to the 199th episode of the Thriller Zone. It's a bonus episode, and as the graphics on the screen show you, it's all about rock and roll. We're going to be talking with Rio Youers, author of The Bang Bang Sisters. It is non-stop rock and roll, murder, and mayhem. So without any further ado, here's Rio. Well, hello, Rio. Thank you for joining us on the Thriller Zone. So good to see you, buddy.
Oh man, I tell you, it's great to be here. I've wanted to come on the show for a long time, so yeah, it's absolutely fantastic to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, you should have asked earlier.
Should have. I was waiting until I got just about big enough. It's been a process, but I think I'm there. Am I big enough for David Temple yet? That was the question I kept asking myself.
Oh my God. Let me tell you something. You are bigger than big. I don't know exactly how I found you. It was either, I know that Anthony Goodell was singing your praises, and someone else close to me said, have you heard about Bang Bang Sisters? I'm like, no, what? Rio Youers. And I'm like, wait, I saw that pop up on X somewhere. And then I started following the thread. And then I saw this cover, which is just damn fantastic, so sexy, so in your face. Everything I like about ball breaking covers, this book did.
That's great. That's what I love to hear.
Yeah. Insert accolades here. But I got to tell you something. Blood, bullets, rock and roll. I got so many things to say about this, which I'm going to get to in a second. But I want to just run down a couple of things that are going to impress my listeners. Rio is the British Fantasy and Sunburst Award-nominated author of Lola on Fire, another great title, No Second Chances. 2017, his thriller, The Forgotten Girl, was a finalist for the Arthur Ellis Award for Best Crime Novel. Golf clap there. And perhaps one of my favorite titles that I've seen this year, at least here in season 7, he's the writer of Refrigerator Full of Heads. 6-issue comic series. I'm a huge graphic novel fan. And this is from DC Comics. Sleeping Beauty is a graphic novel based on the #1 bestseller by Stephen King and Owen King. And his new novel, of course, Bang Bang Sisters, is out now. I am late to the party, but there's an old saying I got, Rio. It doesn't matter if you get to the party late. It's that you got to the party.
Damn right. Absolutely. Yeah, you're not the only one late to the party. So let's hope this show brings a few more people along.
I'm expecting, with this international exposure of this radio podcast, I'm expecting the world to just catch on fire for you. I mean, seriously.
It's going to happen, man.
Yeah.
I've got a feeling about it.
Yeah. We're going to dive in, but I want to know a couple things about you. Now, that is not a Canadian accent I'm hearing.
It is not. No. I was born in the UK and I moved over to Canada when I was 30. So I've been here for a few years now. I love it. I consider it home. I am a Canadian citizen now, and I fully identify as a North American male. And it's great, except when Canada plays soccer, in which I revert back to my English ancestry.
And rightly so. And were you at the gym training before? I see the Everlast t-shirt. Were you doing a little practicing before you came in?
Do you know, I actually was in the gym, but the Everlast t-shirt is just for show. It's the fittest thing about me. It's hiding everything that isn't Everlast.
Excellent. I love that. Well, so you're born in the UK, grew up there, moved to Canada around 30. You've been there ever since. You love it, and you like the States in general because you've been out hitting book tours and so forth in our neck of the woods.
Love the States.
I want to know something. Why? And this is generally something I say for later, but I was talking to myself, which I often do, And on the street, people look at me weird, but I was like, where did the Rio start? What was in it, his influence? When did he start writing? I always like to know those things, like when you started writing, and were you one of those childhood writers, or did you go, you know what, I'm just gonna dive in this both feet, or were you like later in life? Let's start there.
Yeah, no, I've always enjoyed writing stories. I mean, it used to be the only thing I was actually any good at school. And I used to, we had these exercise books that we'd have to do our schoolwork in. And when the teacher wasn't looking, I'd go into the store cupboard and just take them off the shelf and put them in my school bag and go home and then just fill them with stories at home. I had like reams of these things at home and all filled with different. I had this whole series of books that were called Hellfire when I was like 12 years old. And it was like Hellfire 1 through 17 or something. It was a whole series. And I put little illustrations in. And I just loved it. I always loved creating worlds, writing these stories. I didn't necessarily want to be a writer at that time. I think I was too young to really understand the sort of concept. All I knew was that I enjoyed making stuff up. I enjoyed creating characters, putting them in shitty situations and see if they could get out of it. And it's still what I do. I still do that to this day. I think the
Yeah.
difference is I get paid a little bit of money to do it now.
Yeah, well, there is that benefit. And I want to know, as you were coming up, who were some of those influences that you were reading that you're like, man, if I could aspire to that, or if I could even like grasp just even a little modicum of that influence.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen King was a big influence. I know everybody says that, and I sort of, sometimes I try and shy away from it because I don't want to be that cliche writer. But there aren't many writers of my age group who weren't inspired by him in somewhat, shape or form. He's a phenomenon, really. Everything he's achieved, and I mean, when he was writing Pet Cemetery and Christine, I was in my teens. I was prime fodder for those books, and I ate them up. They were great. There was another guy in the UK. His name was James Herbert that I really enjoyed a lot. And before then, Roald Dahl and I used to enjoy a lot of short story anthologies, ghost stories from around the world, that sort of thing. I mean, just anything I really could get my hands on. Um, I think the game changed for me a little bit. I read a book called The Cross Killer by an author named Marcel Montecchino. That book came out, I want to say, in 1989, 1990. And again, I was young. I was 18, 19 years old. And it blew me away because it was completely unafraid. It was completely unflinching. And nowadays, the book probably wouldn't get published in that, in that they would have to change quite a lot in order to make it acceptable for today's audience. And I can totally see that. But it taught me that, and I had just started writing with an intent to get published, thinking, oh, maybe I could do this for a living. I was in my late teens, and it was a game changer because it taught me that you can break rules when you write. You don't have to be afraid. You can push the envelope. You can dare the audience to believe in extreme ways. And that was kind of a benchmark book for me because I sort of aspired after that to get just as crazy and just as outlandish with the character creation, some of the set pieces in my books, and it still is to this day when I think of books that really inspired me. The Cross Killer by Marcel Montecchino is definitely up on the list. He followed it up with a book called Big Time, and then another book called Sacred Heart, I think. And then he disappeared. I think because he died.
Oh, well, that'll do that.
It'll do that, yeah. But yeah, if you like crime fiction, and I assume that the dedicated listeners of the Thriller Zone, they do enjoy some crime fiction.
Oh,
I
yeah.
track down. You probably could only get it on eBay now, but the Cross Killer by Marcel Montecchino is it's fantastic.
I
So
will. I will investigate that, and I'm a big fan of eBay, so I like to find those little lost treasures and pick them up. Now, the funny thing is, there is, in, folks, in case you're wondering, the Bang Bang Sisters is not a Stephen King novel. Now, I think I can sense some influences. However, it is, dare I say, thoroughly unique, and that's one of the things I really liked about it. Now, again, I want to save all my accolades down the road here, but it's so fresh and original. And but speaking of Stephen King, reflecting on your last book, which, as we mentioned earlier, No Second Chances, it's a rip-roaring Hollywood noir that smashes the pedal to the metal and keeps it there. Now that if the fact that you got that quote has got to just make you go, okay, mic drop, I'm done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah. That was a moment, I have to say. Yeah, I mean, it seemed that all my peers in the publishing industry were all getting Stephen King blurbs, and I wasn't getting one. And so when that came through, I thought, great, this is now it's my turn.
Yeah.
And it was great. And it was a really good blurb.
Yeah.
Sometimes I know King can do these endorsements, like and they're just one word, outstanding or
Right.
something like that. And if he did that for me, where it was just one word, I'd be like, yeah, thanks, Steve. But he didn't do that. He gave me a full, proper blurb. He read the damn book. He blurbed it. He loved it. And I was beside myself. Just fantastic.
Read the damn book, a 15-word blurb, and you're off to the races. So
Yeah, it was a
good for you. Here's another good one, though. Alex Segura, a mutual friend of both of ours, says The Bang Bang Sisters reads like a lost Tarantino classic with a verve and body count to prove it. Now that is, and that's funny. I'm gonna borrow off of this for just a second, if you would,
Yeah.
Rio. When I was reading this, I did feel like it was a little bit of, I felt influences of Kill Bill, Pulp Fiction, not as much Reservoir Dogs, but really kind of that Kill Bill specifically because of, you're going to see a gal with nunchucks and a sword, and you got a double barrel shotgun and a 9mm. I mean,
Yeah, it's balls to the wall. It's absolutely chaotic. Going back to what I was saying about the Marcel Montalcino book, just being unafraid and saying, okay, we're gonna go all the way with this one. This is gonna be a banger.
yeah,
So yeah, Kill Bill's a great. I mean, it's such a fantastic movie. But the scene in that where Uma Thurman's character, she's in the restaurant, and then all of the crazy eights are all coming in. There's 50, 60 guys, and she just takes them all out. It's so crazy. It's so chaotic. And I lapped up every goddamn second of that. And I thought to myself, I want to do that. I want to do that in a book. And I don't care who doesn't like it. I'm going to do it because I like it. And that's what I did with this. It's just chaotic, crazy, balls to the wall fun.
Well, Rio, I'm going to put a marker here on the show. And folks, I want to remember this later when we get down to my closing question that I always do, is that you just said kind of that penultimate thing that you want to remember is that I want to write a book that I love, that moves me, that entertains me, that gets my rocks off. And that's what I like about this. And the fact that you just said that gives me great confidence and lets me know that you're one of those guys, because you know what? You're going to please yourself. And if everyone else likes it, great. And if not, too bad.
Can't do anything about that. Yeah.
And your third quote, I got to finish this because Meg Gardner is a very dear friend of mine and a huge fan of yours. As she says, buckle up. This story rocks. The characters pop and the writing sizzles. Could be my favorite quote. That smokes. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so overjoyed when I got that from Meg. Yeah. A friend of mine, Chris Golden, who's a fantastic writer in his own right, reached out to Meg and said, hey, you got to read this book because I think you'll love it. And she did, and she gave me that fantastic quote, and I emailed her straight away, and I was beside myself with gratitude. Just fantastic. I love that, and I love that about this community. You see that a lot, writers helping out one another. It's a grind, and we all understand it, and you've got to pass it on. You just got to help people out, and when it happens, when I help other writers out, that makes me feel good, and I know it makes them feel good, and it goes the other way as well. We don't like asking for blurbs; it's our least favorite part of the job.
Sure.
But in the reality, it is a part of the job because we have to do so much of the heavy lifting when it comes to our own publicity and our own marketing nowadays. So the other authors, we all understand this, and we help each other out where we can. So Meg's just a shining example of someone who really looks out for their own.
Yes, huge high fives to Meg. Meg is a huge supporter of the community. I love her to death. She's written a couple of good books. I mean, Heat 2,
Yeah.
a whole 3 different series. I mean, she knows what she's talking about. But I thought it would be nice if I gave you maybe my little, as though I was going to give you a blurb, and I'll even put it up on the screen so it looks all official and everything. And this is what I had to say. This book raises the roof, turning the knob to 11, as it's got all the action, revenge, and ass kicking you look for in an action thriller.
Boom. I like it. There it is. Talk about mic drop. That's how you do it, my friend. You're not just a pretty face.
Go on. But I think one of my biggest compliments, though, is that even though it plays like a similar band and other writers, this book is so thoroughly fresh from the absolute get-go. And if you will, as you'll see, I got a couple of post-it notes, lines that just jumped out at me. Do you mind?
Please do.
The very first one, I'm only into the prologue, and I go, it was light enough to see, but shadowy enough to not be seen. I'm like, okay, now that's just some literary shit thrown at you right there. In a good way. All right, but here's one of my favorites. I love this. And it's in the world of analogies. And Rio, you nailed this. It didn't matter how many times they had done this, talking about the girls doing their clandestine service after hours. That's all I'm going to say. Didn't matter how many times they'd done this, how many drug dealers, rapists, and killers they'd taken out. Bria always felt a wave of nervous energy. Like being on stage, they depended on talent and timing, but an amp could blow at any time. A snare head could break. This was a live performance.
Yeah. You never know what's going to happen when you're out there doing it live.
And then this is a little piece of poetry, and with this I will wrap on that. The rail yard woke her a touch shy of 4 p.m., an aggressive, steaming sound. She opened her eyes. Her dreams whispered against her lashes, as light as leaves, then gone.
So it's not all pulp, see? There's some good stuff in there.
I mean, come on now, right? You've got ass kicking, and then you've got poetry. I mean, it's just chock full. All right, there you have it. I will wager that you were a more than regular creative kid. Is that safe to say, Rio? I mean, you had some real creativity going on upstairs.
Oh yeah, yeah. God, without making it sound like I'm blowing my own trumpet. That's all I do. That's my life is creating everything. I write. That's my job. I play music. It's guitar behind it.
Yeah, what is that? A 6-string guitar is in the background for those listening only. That's a beauty.
Yeah, it's a acoustic Simon and Patrick. Nice little guitar. Play in a band. I MC a lot around town. I do a lot of public events. So a bit of a hype guy for local bands, and that's just going on stage and again making stuff up on the spot, which is kind of what I do for a job. But I do it with with my mouth, supposed to with my fingers and my mind, and that gives me a lot of pleasure. But yeah, anything I could do. I draw a little bit, yeah. And I'm very much the black sheep of my family. I come from a family where there's no creativity, all very working class. My dad was a construction worker. My mom, she went on to work in healthcare. But when I was a kid, she was just a stay-at-home mom. Yeah, and it was all very, very working class and not a lot of creativity. So I was definitely the black sheep of the family. Like I said, I was at home scribbling my stories out and even writing songs and things at a very young age. And it was just something that always moved me. And I think now, and I've sort of looked at it a little bit more introspectively as I've gotten older, and I think my childhood wasn't the greatest, and I think a lot of it was an effort to escape from some of that, open doorways into different places and different worlds. And it's not to get too psychological about the whole thing, but reading for me was always an escape, and writing has provided the same kind of escape.
All right, let's take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to hear more about the Bang Bang Sisters by Rio Youers, our guest right here today on the Thriller Zone. Stay with us. And now back to the show. If you listen to the show, you'll know what a fanatic I am of book covers. And I've got to say, between Bang Bang Sisters, No Second Chances, Lola on Fire, those three right there are just take my breath away. They're so good. I'm looking at Halcyon, which looks like it's a slightly different thing. Is that it looks like a mystery that takes place on an island late at night. Is that fair?
But judging from the cover, yeah, it's about a cult. It's a realized version of the United States that people have established on this island in the middle of Lake Ontario, but it isn't what everybody thinks it is. Um, it's very dark place. It's a cult essentially, and I would call that a paranormal thriller. So it has supernatural elements to it, but it's still that sort of pulse pounding, edge of the seat kind of thrill ride that I like to bring my readers.
Here's another one, The Forgotten Girl. That is a dynamite cover. It's double on what I call kind of double entendre, and I'm guessing that's a straight ahead murder thriller of some sort. Yes.
There is murder in it for sure, lots of murder, and there are definitely some thrills. Again, that's more supernatural. In fiction, I started out my roots, I guess, are in horror fiction.
Okay.
A lot of the short stories I wrote and a couple of my very early sort of small press novels were horror novels, and this was me sort of segueing into the thriller market. So it wasn't like a direct leap. I did it by degrees, and The Forgotten Girl and Halcyon were my two sort of supernatural thrillers, where I was hoping to sort of close the gap between horror and thrillers, just playing both sides a little bit.
Sure. Well,
I love both of those books, and The Forgotten Girl particularly holds a dear place to me because that was my first novel with a major New York publisher, which was always the dream, always the ambition.
Wow. And yet, when I look at Westlake Soul, this looks like something that this is not a thriller. This looks like some kind of, is it a feel good? There's a puppy and a kid on a surfboard in the water at sunset.
Yeah. You've got to read that book. I tell you, you'll never read anything like it. It doesn't really have a genre. I call it a metaphysical fantasy. It's about this kid, this surfer. His name's Westlake Soul, titular character, and he has a surfing accident, and he goes into a permanent vegetative state. But what happens is he becomes a super genius. So he can't walk, he can't talk, he has no response to stimulus. He's essentially in this vegetative state, but he can astral project, he can read minds, he can communicate with his dog. So the hook is that he's people say we only use 10% of our brains. It's like an iceberg. So we use that 10%. The 10% that we can use is for walking and talking and communicating. Well, Westlake Soul has flipped the iceberg. So he's lost access to that 10%, but he has the other 90.
Wow.
That's the hook. And it's I love all of my books. I'm very fond of them, but Lola on Fire and No Second Chances. There are other books kind of like it out there. High octane action thrillers, character driven, just good fun. But there are not many books, really not many, maybe not any books like Westlake Soul. It's kind of hard to find. But if you do find a copy again, if you're digging around on eBay, you should read it because it's. I've had so much more email about that book than any other book, and it's very dear to me, and I always urge people to read it.
All right. Well, not to be greedy, but is a copy on the wall behind you?
I have 3 of the limited edition copies left of that one. Yeah, with the artwork from Vincent. Yeah, 3 of them. I'll see what I can do for you, Mr. Temple. I'll see what I can do.
If one floated my way, I would even read it and I would hold it with gloves on, and then I would return it to you if that's necessary.
We can sort something out. Let's work it out.
All right. Okay. But let's go back to Bang Bang Sisters, because this is not to make the story about me, but this is about you. But I have a story, and it's a story I wrote 15 years ago. And so when I picked up Bang Bang Sisters, I'm like, oh, there's a little tiny pieces that remind me of that. So that's why I got so excited about this book, because it reignited something in my head. Right. And I just want to say thank you for that. Well, thank you. I want to riff on something here. I'm a big fan, and you don't get to see this a lot these days. I mean, yeah, you saw it in Quentin's work, but having a a brigade of ass-kicking women taking matters into their own hands. And these are scumbags. So there's a little bit of that Dexter. Well, I'm only serial killing bad people. Tell me how that came about.
I had the sisters in my head. First of all, I wanted to write the story. Like, as you know, I'm a musician as well, and I wanted to write a story about this traveling rock band, these three women, and I just like the idea of them being on the road and being out there in the great crazy America,
Yeah.
and they get into some kind of trouble. I didn't know what, but I had them in my head, and they were too alive. They were too vibrant in my head. I knew I had to do something with them, and I thought, well, maybe they witness a murder, or maybe one of them, ends up going off with some guy, and he's a bad guy, and then they get involved in all of that. Like my mind was going off in all these different places. But when I hit upon the idea of them to be vigilantes,
Yeah.
and I just imagined their tour van, which is kind of half loaded with musical gear and half loaded with weaponry. I thought, that's it. That's the hook. And then everything else fell into place.
Yeah.
And it just all the pieces just lined up, and I had a novel, and I was like, this is it. I just love this idea. So yeah, but I like we talked about Quentin Tarantino earlier, and Kill Bill just being a great example, I think, of watching women on film just taking it to these guys, these bad men, and turning the tables, which I love to see, and I'm a big fan of that. And I think as well, there are so many, and they're all great male action figures, from Jack Reacher, James Bond, and Jack Ryan, and all of these great characters. But there aren't enough great female action heroes in
Right.
contemporary fiction, and I wanted to do something about that. I wanted to address that, and so my Bang Bang Sisters and Lola on Fire, to a certain degree, well, no, definitely Lola on Fire is my contribution to the thriller genre, and I brought the girls with me.
Yeah. It's so funny. You mentioned this a second ago when they go into the back of the van. Yeah, it's chock full of equipment because they're a traveling rock band. But then when I saw the gun in the gun case, it made me think of El Mariachi. Remember this? Like
Yeah,
1992 is Robert Rodriguez's breakout low budget independent film. I don't know how he snatched Antonio Banderas, but it basically skyrocketed his career. But a little bit of that influence, right?
yeah. No, I love that movie, and Robert Rodriguez as well. That whole Grindhouse thing, was
Oh
a
yeah,
big influence for the Bang Bang Sisters. So, and what, that was inside me, and my own personal feeling towards my approach for this book. And now that the book's out there in the world, and I hear a lot of people making those references and saying, "Oh, it reminds me of Robert Rodriguez, it reminds me of Tarantino," you know, to me, I feel job done.
good. Because I didn't want you to. I was wanted to be careful not to insult you by going, "Oh, this feels derivative of," and yet those influences are strategically there, and I love them. So I really can't see them being anything but a compliment.
It's a huge compliment, and when you grow up and you're a fan of those types of movies, you can't help but to color your own creativity. So that's what's happened here. And the Bang Bang Sisters is, it definitely lends, it owes something to Robert Rodriguez's Desperado, and Once Upon a Time in, what was it? What's that one with Johnny Depp in it? Once Upon a Time in, I can't remember. I forget it.
That's okay.
But the and Kill Bill and Pulp Fiction, and those just fantastic sort of grindhouse movies. Death Proof of as well, with the three girls and the stunt. One of them's a stunt. Do you remember that one? Kurt Russell, with his stunt driver, and they end up
Oh
going
yeah.
out.
Oh, all right. Well, first of all, I'm going to back up. Once upon a time in Mexico.
Mexico. That was, I was going to say America, but they knew it wasn't that. It's Mexico. Yeah.
That was '03. That was Banderas, Selma Hayek, Johnny Depp, William Dafoe, Danny Trejo, Mickey Rourke. I mean, it was chock full. But the one you're thinking about, and I actually own them, and it is, it's Grindhouse, Planet Terror, Grindhouse, Death Proof.
Death Proof. That's the one. That's the Tarantino one. So yeah, there's definitely flavors of that, but the Bang Bang Sisters is still its own thing.
Yes.
you read out some passages there that it stakes its claim in that sort of subgenre, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm just tremendously proud of it, and the feedback so far has all been really favorable. So, yeah, no, the fact that it has been compared to those movies is to me a great compliment.
Well, yeah, you have you've nailed it in a genre that we all love, but yet is very specific to your signature style. I want to, as we begin to wrap, there's a couple of business things that I'd love to throw at you. One of them is, and I'm just curious because you were talking about one of your books being, let's see, it was the Forgotten Girl being that first one that really went to a big house. How many times did you reach out to agents before someone finally went, yeah, you're the guy?
I mean, God, I've in the 80s, that was when I started writing. I did everything on a typewriter, and you had to put things in an envelope and send it off with a stamp, and it might
Yeah.
take 3 months to get a response. I've lost count of how many stamps I've licked and then envelopes I've sent out and addresses I've written. Hundreds probably, and throughout the years. And then I had, I think I had three agents actually, before I landed on the agent I have now, New York-based guy, Howard Moorheim. Fantastic agent. Has been in the business for 50 years. Really, um, educated in the way of publishing, which is exactly what you want. And very proud to be on his in his stable of authors. But yeah, there were a lot of inquiries and knocking on doors, and long before even emails came along.
But see, isn't this a great testament to you with for tenacity and as an encouragement to up and coming writers to go, if this is something you want to do and you love it, you have to just press forward until you can't press forward anymore. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's all you can do. And some people get lucky, they get their first or their second book picked up, or their third. And, I wasn't lucky. It took me 30 years of writing before I landed the deal with a New York publisher. But the thing was, I got closer every time. Every book I wrote was better than the one before, and it seemed to get a little bit further up the ladder. And that's not when you stop, that's when you keep going.
Right.
So, and it is tenacity, or maybe it's bloody mindedness, maybe even stupidity. I don't know. It's a combination of all those things. But the other thing, the most important thing, is that writing it floats my boat. It's what I love to do.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't I do it? You can get frustrated because you're not getting the responses you want or the responses you hoped for. But at the end of the day, what are you going to do? Stop writing? Stop doing what you love? That was never
Yeah.
an option.
No. Do you have any thoughts on the publishing world these days, as since you've been at it for so long and you're now in among the higher echelons? Do you have any feelings about it? Do you have thoughts about the traditional or non-traditional self-publishing, so forth? We've been talking about this on the show lately. Any thoughts in general about that?
Um, I guess so. There was a time, I think, when self-publishing used to be sort of a little bit taboo and looked down upon. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think a lot of people are finding it to be quite profitable, and they're getting great audiences, and they're putting out the content they want to put out. At the end of the day, as long as you're doing what you love to do and in a way you love to do it, then who's anybody else to say you shouldn't do that? Um,
Exactly.
so, yeah. My only, I guess, caveat to that is, when you publish something, and whether you publish it digitally or you put out like a print on demand book, then it's done, it's out there. And
Yeah.
if you're not 100% happy with it, if that's not a book you can turn around and look at in 10 years' time and go, I still love that book, then maybe you shouldn't be out there. Because, when I was 16, 17 years old writing books, I felt that they were the best books on the planet. And if digital publishing had been around at the time, damn right, I would have done it.
Yeah.
And then I would have been like 10 years later, when I could see that they were actually all just big bags of shit, I would have looked at them and gone, oh my God, they're still reading this and they still have access to it. And I don't know, it would have destroyed me. So that's my only thing. You've really got to be sure that the book you put out is the book you really want to put out, because there's no going back. Once it's out in
Yeah.
the world, it is out in the world.
Make sure it is not a big bag of shit. That's really kind of the bottom line takeaway,
That's
right?
it. Exactly. And the thing is, here's the cold hard truth, is that a lot of first books, a lot of first efforts are not so great.
Right.
And that's just the way it goes. It's a learning process. And so, maybe don't publish your first book. Maybe consider publishing your second or your third. But
Yeah.
do what you love and do what makes you happy. That's the real bottom line.
I got taken to school recently. Now, I actually mentioned that you were coming up next week. You're going to be running a little bit later. But I was talking to Lee Goldberg, who's going to be on the show 1 week from today. And he basically told me, without any pulling any punches, David, go back to your self-published books that you have up on Amazon, yank them out, turn the buttons off, put them in the drawer, call it a day. They haven't done you any favors. They made you some beer money. They're not rating anywhere, making you rich. They're probably not all that fantastic. Just get rid of them so that when you're really ready, because here's what it is, Rio, and I'll finish with this. I told him that I was going to write 9 books to work out my kinks and to get the rhythm going. And on number 10, I was going to go for the real thing. He's like, yeah, that sounds great in process, on paper maybe, but in reality, no. So just go flush those little bad boys. So I went crying in the corner, but I made it happen. All right.
It's tough love. That is tough love.
You know what? I'd rather have tough love than somebody blowing smoke up my skirt. All right. One last question before I close, or 2 last questions. This is, and you can't blame me for this, but please tell me that the Bang Bang Sisters is going to be a movie, for crying out loud.
Well, there's nothing set in stone yet, but there are a few things moving. There are a few things happening. I can say that much, and not in the world of film, but in the world of TV.
Like TV series?
Yeah, TV show. Yeah. I can't say too much at the moment, but
You can't tell me networks or anything like that.
no, it hasn't gone that far down. And I've been here before, like
Yeah.
where where the carrot has been dangled, and you tell everybody, "Oh my God, it's going to be a movie," and Brad
Yeah.
Pitt's starring, and then everything crumbles. So I'm treading very carefully here because I'm aware that my heart could very well be broken into 1,000 pieces again.
Yeah.
But I can say that there are people out there in Hollywood land who are working very hard to have it developed as a TV show.
Okay.
People who are doing that are very well connected.
All right. Well, I'm going to say this. Not that you need this from me, but I can guarantee you this is going to end up on a screen somewhere. It's got everything you want for that visual assault while still having a great storytelling. So it's not just, John Wick killing hundreds of people, single-handedly, but it's a great story. So I want to wrap as that. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I want to wrap with the same question I always ask, and that is your best writing advice. You have now done enough work here with six big novels, 3 graphic novels, short stories, short fiction, a plethora of short stories, by the way. If you go to his website, which we'll plug here in a second, you'll see that. So I know you have developed best writing advice for future writers.
I mean, there are a few little things that I've definitely picked up over the years. I would say that you do your best work when you're away from technology. If you have the time or whatever or the inclination to go out with a notepad and pen and sit down on a park bench, or maybe go into not a restroom. I was going to say a restaurant. I mean a coffee shop, something like that, and just write. With on pen and paper, you cut away from the machines. That I find that the purest work always comes out then. And the other piece of advice I would say is when you are on screen and you're going back and you're reading through your work, try changing up the font. Try making it bigger using a completely different font, because then you learn to read it with a different set of eyes, and you'll see things that you never saw before. That's something that always works for me. You actually look at it with a different set of eyes because you're not used to reading it in the same way. Your eyes get used to that font, and when you
Sure.
change that, you read it in a different way.
That is very clever and a great piece of advice. It's interesting. The minute you said that, I'm working on a book right now, and if I'm working in a manuscript form at double space 12 font New York Times blah blah blah,
Yeah.
seeing it that way does not get me excited. So I put it into a little program I've got called Vellum, which automatically formats it to a book. So you can make it 6x9 or whatever you want, and you can change the font willy nilly. That gets me excited because I can see it. So as I'm writing, it looks like a book that already exists, and for some reason, that really gooses me.
Yeah,
Kind of like
I always do right margin flush when I write as well because I don't know, it just looks nice, and
yeah,
it's a visual thing, right? It's a visual connection. And the
yeah.
first thing my editors do is turn that off. So when they send it back for me for the edit, it's all, but I still do it. That's the hill I will die on, the right margin flush hill. I will die on that hill. A little tip for aspiring scribes.
I like it. Very good. Well, folks, if you want to learn more, go to rioyouers.com. That's RIOYOUERS.com. Check out all his books. Read about him, read about the novels, graphic novels, short fiction. Now, of course, we've covered a lot of it here on the show, but you can drill down and, of course, order the books at rioyouers.com. Dude, we had a couple of tech issues. Big deal. It happens. But thank you for your patience, and thank you so much for carving out so much time with me.
Oh man, I tell you, it was a blast. I had a great time. It was everything I wanted it to be, and at last I got on the show. So thank you so much for having me. It was a real treat.
Thank you.
Your front row seat to the best thriller.